Morning, everyone, and welcome to the Symposium Lost and Found in the Archive. And so, this symposium, which will last the whole day today, is an extension of the exhibition that you see right here around, and some of you, I think, have already seen it. And the exhibition is called Lost in the Archive. So, exhibition, as it may have occurred to those who have seen it, or to those who will see it, they will see that it starts from this archive of the Latvian Center for Contemporary Art, which is an archive of materials about the artists and was started to compile in the 90s. And that part of the exhibition is really seen on the platform, like the gray platform, and that is somehow a core of the whole exhibition. And afterwards, we decided to somehow extend the project and to include many more artists that deal with the archives, that use it as a method or as an object, that create archives, that analyze them, criticize them, and also criticize some things that are not really archived. And then the symposium also somehow unites and juxtaposes these different practices that have chosen archive as their object, method of inquiry. And we think that it's like a very, very important, especially now, and insightful also to use the archive as a source, since understanding of the past and all its complexities is somehow emancipating for when you think about what happens now and also when you think about the future. So that could be really one, let's say, reason why we think it's important to always look in the archive, because archive somehow can really say a lot about the past moments. And also, we were thinking that it's important to avoid the short and sort of linear memory, which happens maybe especially now, because there is this contradiction of internet and many archives being accessible and vastly somehow shared on the internet, but on the other hand, it seems that this information is somehow suspended because it doesn't really change so much the habits of people to how to find information, how to analyze it. So then, especially taking that context into consideration, we were thinking that it's very important to see historians, artists, and curators that actually deal with the archive. So I will give a word to my colleague Andra, who will give a short introduction of this archive of the Latvian Center for Contemporary Art, which sort of is an inspiration or a starting point of this exhibition and symposium. And and from that we will go to many directions. And I hope that you will ask a lot of questions and challenge the speakers and be interested.
Thank you, Inga. I'm happy to see you here and welcome. And as Inga said, I will give a short introduction about Latvian Center for Contemporary Art archive. Just summing up in a few words. So, as Inga said, the idea for the exhibition came from our archive. So, what is our archive? We have lots of portfolios and artist portfolios and different documentations from different art events, exhibitions, artists, portraits, etc. And this all leads back to 90s when the archive was started. And it was started by, at that time, by an initiative from George Soros, and which made this Contemporary Art Center, Riga, Soros Contemporary Art Center, Riga. And in a way, when the center was established, there came also different there came different kind of manuals. So basically, they came with the idea that they will give some kind of a description about how here people from art scene have to document art, what they have to document, and also what kind of things they have to choose for the archive, and giving the priority to contemporary art and really experimental things, which really at that time challenged, as in these 90s, which is this shifting, which is this changing time from the Soviet to the Free State, and so this understanding also is very important in this archive. So we wanted to really understand in the end, what are these things in the archive? Are they really showing the real situation in these 90s? Or they are just following these manuals. So we have researched and digged in the archive and found different interesting facts which are storage in this archive, which you can see also here in the exhibition in this platform. And the Soros Contemporary Art Center existed till '99, and then the the financement from the Soros was cut, and so the center was left in kind of it was independent. And so the Latvian Center for Contemporary Art was established. And now we have inherited this archive. And we are continuing to document art events and artist works. And this is some kind of something what we continue to do. And so I guess I will give the floor for the first speakers, and I will invite Þorgerður Ólafsdóttir and Becky, Forsythethe, and what is describing what they will both talk about. So they are both from Reykjavík, Iceland, and Þorgerður is the director of the Living Art Museum. And what for us seemed interesting in their work is that the organization is run by the artist. It's artist initiative. No? Yeah. And so basically they are independent organization who is archiving the parallel events in the contemporary art, as there is in Reykjavík, there is only the modern art museum. There is not contemporary art museum. Yeah. So the floor is yours. I guess you can.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello. I might be. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Like Andra said, I'm an artist, and I've been the director of the board and the director of the museum, the Living Art Museum in Iceland, since 2014. Nýlistasafnið is daily referred to as Nýló, or the Living Art Museum. It came about in 1978 because of a very general discontent within the art scene in Iceland amongst artists, because the National Gallery, that was the only art museum at the time, which is the Modern Art Museum, was not collecting contemporary work that was happening in the 60s and 70s, that was sort of changing and opening up the art scenes like everywhere. And the group was 27 artists at various stages in their careers, and this discussion about forming a new museum had been in the pipelines for 5 years, but it was just at this point, in the beginning of January, that they decided to formalize and structure it in a way that sort of met their ambition and their vision for the future. So the mission statement is extremely ambitious, as you can see. The structure of the museum is foremost democracy. There were 5 artists and individuals serving as the board at large for 2 years, with an alternate board members for 1 year. And also the director of the museum has to run every year. So at our annual meeting there is a vote, and the members of the association, which was to begin with the 27 artists, are now 375. Not everyone attends the annual meetings, although they're very, very entertaining and interesting, but we have up to 30 people at a time, because the issues that come up and we have to deal with every year are very big and large. And so there is this great solidarity and history of artist-run initiatives in Iceland, and what sort of began it was the Gallery Zoom, which was established in 1965 as the first artist-run initiative in Reykjavík. So this was the sort of formulation of fluxes in Iceland, and like the avant-garde was in the forefront, and this term nihilist directly means new art, which was supposed to be something different from what was happening currently, like contemporary art, but they were trying to formalize what they specifically were doing, which now we sort of look at as being this avant-gardian, forward thinking with performative acts, which were really new and sort of annoying people a lot. The museum acquired most of its founding work from Gallery Zoom. The man that's standing in the middle, he is Niels Hafstein. He was the first director of the board and sort of the main character within developing this idea of the Living Art Museum. And he saved most of the works that were left behind after Gallery Zoom stopped operating in its location in 1972. So it had been going on for 7 years, full on. And then he had been working with the artist Ragnar Kjartansson, the sculptor, who is Ragnar Kjartansson's grandfather. And Niels and Ragnar donated over hundreds of work to the collection of Nýló, which were mostly bookworks and prints by Dieteroth, for example. And so in the first 3 years of Nýló's operation, the museum acquired more than half of its collection, which now consists of over 2,000 works. So Nýló was at the very beginning this museum, and the gallery and the exhibition venue started in 1981 because there was a very big need as well for the venue, for a new venue that would exhibit these new generations of artists. So for the next 20 decades, the board sort of had an open application process where artists could apply for, and they were basically just given the keys to the 3 floors that the museum later required above their collection space, which used to house the Gallery of Zoom. So these two histories are very intertwined and connected. And the program was very I think there was a new opening every other week, and many exhibitions going on the different floors. And because up until recently, there hasn't been any master programs or further education for arts in Iceland. So everyone goes abroad to acquire like a master's degrees and like broaden their horizon, to like leave this island fever and, you know, go to the mainland. And so it was through school and friendship over there that artists started coming to Iceland, and their go-to point was Nýló, which was sort of this creative hub and still remains today as the main location for contemporary art. Later, the Reykjavík Art Museum was founded, so their sort of mission is the contemporary art museum, but Nýló still remains in this middle, being a very open platform for experiments and innovative art, like the original mission started as, but then also this sort of gateway into the art scene as well. So many artists who are newly graduated, they want to become members of the board. And so what followed was, for 20 years, over 600 exhibitions of Icelandic and international artists, emerging and established. And it's interesting to hear the older generation of artists talking about this as the glory days, where freedom was upheld, and like this venue was a place for like where like magic happened, and we do believe that, and I think there's a lot to it for sure. But this sort of like non-linear, like open forum venue was something that artists around the millennia were starting to discuss and wanting to have a more sort of programmed program and selective. So the collection was housed in this house here, but during 2001 the new board decided to move the exhibition venue from this place, and then the collection followed into a storage space at the Icelandic Academy, and they started Nýló again in the opposite building as the sort of Kunsthalle, with a very ambitious selective program focusing on international artists. And the decision was debated a lot, although the big move was approved during the annual meeting. And this work, Draugurinn, or The Ghost of Sum, has a very interesting story behind it, because the artist Kristján Guðmundsson, who is a very established artist in Iceland and the older brother of Sigurður Guðmundsson, and he's one of the founders of Nýló, and he applied with an exhibition in 2001 and wanting to show in this new premises of the museum. But his reply, the answer he got was, "We've had enough of this Zoom shit. You can take your Zoom ghost and go," basically. So he donated this artwork to the collection, and the drawing is part of an installation in a brown box. So it's sort of like it's very symbolic, and we sort of uphold this work as like we are aware of the Zoom history, and it is like a very important factor in the history of Nýló. But what happened between those 6 years were that the museum went bankrupt. They had to move again. the house that they had bought was very damaged, but it didn't like show up on the papers, so there was a bit of a scam going on. And yeah, so Becky, she will now continue what happened with Nýló after 2007, but today Nýló is there very much this platform for contemporary art and museum that acquires new art as well. We are currently based in the suburbs of Reykjavík. We were the first art venue to move from the center, creating a lot of shock because artists are the only group of people that can't take the bus, as it turns out. But what happened was that this sort of insular world opened up to the public, and now we have guests ranging from 4-year-old to senior citizen coming to see this museum that they have heard so much about in the past 40 years. We also renovated an old public underground female lavatory in the center that's listed, and changed it into an exhibition space, but sort of underlying the structure of the space. And then in the beginning of 2017, we're moving into a different facility with our exhibition space, thus, hopefully, but maybe I shouldn't say this, ending this moving rotation, which has been sort of like the main factor of Nýló for the past 38 years. But we're going to this herring factory at the harbour, together with an artist-run gallery called Kling & Bang, and the studio of Ólafur Elíasson, and the exhibition space is just amazing. It's like really, really wonderful. But I'm gonna stop now.
Okay, so I just want to take 1 minute and go back to this Zoom ghost, because what it highlights in a way is this position that Nýló has had from its very beginning, where it was established as a collection first and then became an exhibition space. So in many ways there's been a dual role happening where the artists and the members behind the institution, have been running into the future and keeping up with the contemporary moment, but because of the collection, there's also this relationship to the past. And so I think this image and this short story sort of addresses exactly the dilemma that Nýló consistently is addressing. So in 2007, sort of the period of discoveries and self-discovery began for Nýló, where although the exhibition period of the past had been very active and the main focal point, collecting material surrounding the activity, was still in play. Initially, like Þorgerður pointed out, the collection, sort of the main components of it, were accumulated quite quickly. So artists were to give 2 works upon entering their membership, and then a work consecutively every year after that. And throughout time, this sort of regulation has changed, and at points collecting has nearly stopped, but it has always sort of been a shadow following all of the other activity. So in 2007, at this point, the collection and the exhibition space had been in separate locations. And the storage space where the collection was housed was no longer available, so the board at the time found themselves in the position where their entire collection, which they knew very little about, had no housing. So the only available location was the exhibition space. And one day it just arrived on the front door and was sort of taken in. And there's one thing that I should point out. It's that when the collection began, there wasn't really a formal policy in place for how this would happen. So we do have, different versions of gift receipts from the past, but there's many things sort of that weren't collected at the time that certain works came into the establishment. So the board literally didn't know what was in the crates that arrived. And at this point, they were forced with making the big decision of whether to open up the entire collection and figure out what it exactly was, or to get rid of it. And this question had come up before. People have different opinions on it, and I think have from the beginning that if you're not able to collect in a proper way with a formulated purpose and gather all the right information at the time, then why collect it all if it's just, a pile of things with no words. So the board decided that they would open up these crates. And what that literally meant was that there was a halt put on all exhibition activities, and the exhibition space was turned into sort of a cycle of temporary exhibitions that were put up from the works in the collection. So as things were unpacked, they were put up, and the community was invited in to sort of fill in the missing information that the board didn't have about the works. Many of the works, the author was unknown, or how they were acquired was completely unknown. All of these sort of things. So it literally was, like a personal collection that the purpose for hadn't totally been figured out yet. So one key point in this process was that there was a heavy reliance on the current board and former boards, on the community and members, and on the public who sort of became collaborators in this registration and archival process. So much of the information that informs both the collection and the other activities at Nýló is really based on this oral tradition and this history that is sort of collectively informed by personal stories and memories. So when this happened, it was also a point where Nýló was really faced with looking into itself, looking into its own purpose, and deciding what the future of the institution would be. Out of this process, the book that's just circulating, the larger one, was created, which is actually an archival text based on the exhibitions period from 1978 till 2008. And that sort of sealed off, the information that was missing. So what was revealed in this process was, it was clear that there were a lot of holes that needed to be filled for the story to be told in a complete way. And like I said, that relied greatly on this oral history, and also sort of things that came in at the time that formed the period that we were looking at. And then, sort of most importantly, two main archives developed out of that. One based on performance work, so the performance archive, which material about these performances already existed in the collection, but they were formally established into this archive in 2008. Documentation of works had ended up in the collection or in the ephemera that existed, and they're now formally organized in an archive that addresses individual artists and also collectives. And it's something that we're very much working with today. It's an open topic and one that we have many questions about as well. So, for example, the archive consists of a range of material. There's digital recordings, there's hand-drawn sketches, there's photographs with no negatives, there's now a series of interviews based on performances that we see as an ongoing project, scripts. So it's a very diverse collection of things that in some ways, once again, we find ourselves in the same position where we have to sort of decide or define the boundaries of this archive in not too definite a way, but with some sort of boundaries that history, in a sense, is not repeated, because we've learned that registering a collection as an afterthought is a great learning experience, but also can produce a lot of headache. And the second archive that was established was the Archive of Artist-Run Initiatives. So this archive looks at artist-run activities around the island. And in Iceland, there's quite a wealth of this sort of activities. Some of them, have a long history, and some are very short. And there's really a lot of material that pertains to these. So it starts before Nýló and is carried up to the present day. It's still, both of these archives are still very much open and active, even though we're sort of collecting from the past as well.
And maybe a way to not forget is to make a publication, is to print something out, because the archive boxes they can remain closed, and after we had to move the collection to a different location, 2014, the focus was on the collection. That has to be the priority, and then we can think about the exhibition venue and where to place the archives. But maybe what we have now is this this openness and the aim to make a publication about the artist-run initiatives and the artist-run spaces in Iceland. And the chart that we have been looking at is this, and unfortunately you can't see the name of the actual venues and places, but after this sort of gathering of information from this archive of artist-run initiatives, what has become very clear is that the artist-run spaces, they have shaped and impacted and sort of, they created the art scene and the cultural scene in Iceland. And that is something that you don't learn about in school at all. And we are very much aware of this, the responsibility that follows archiving and collecting, and the necessity of sort of bringing this aspect out to the public and make note of, and as part of art history. So then when to stop archiving, because we have informations and documents that can form another archive that is archive of sentiments, the sentimental history of Nýló, letters between board members and artists, and memorials that were held when someone passed away, which has been very prominent in Nýló as well. And then the archive of lost artworks. So throughout the history, a lot of the artwork has been lost for one reason or another, like damaged, taken out of the collection, or just disappeared simply. So we get regular questions, artists that approach each board with the same question: do you know about this work? And there is no information of these lost artworks. So in a way to preserving those works, or like the idea of the work and how it was a description, we are starting to formulate this archive of lost artworks in Nýló.
And just one other thing, there's the other publication that we're circulating. Like I said, Nýló sort of addresses this dual role, and for many years the board that was engaged with registering the collection and sort of having this inward dialogue with Nýló itself, was interested in having conversations around these ideas about, is it the right direction to continue this collecting and sort of activity that some would view as dormant or not conducive to this contemporary movement forward. And the publication Archive on the Run was produced as a result. So within the collection, within that publication, there's a project that took sort of the information and the collection and researched it in a series of graphs, which revealed
a startling truth.
Yeah, valuable information, but also exactly what points were missing. And so this, it goes into depth about sort of theoretical ideas also around the act of collecting and archiving. And I think the attempt there was to sort of reconcile this past and sort of prove to the public that Nýló is still alive and living. So at this point, it became sort of an obsessive thing, and at this point, we've made a decision that we've moved beyond this sort of self-reflective thing, and that it's the sort of gap between the collecting and archiving activities and the exhibition activities is not something that we see as such a great sort of divide, because in many ways they go hand in hand and inform each other.
And so it was interesting that during this research and like registration period, there was an exhibition held in the museum called the Living Dead Museum. And I think it received a Nordic Baltic fund actually. So what the charts, sort of like the end point, is that the chart also revealed the gender gap in Nýló, which maybe shouldn't have become a surprise, because during the 60s there was very few women practicing art, and only 6 of the 27 artists that founded the museum were women. But we are faced with big questions like, how do you revise a collected, incoherent history and the collection? For example, with this particular work that was a bookwork by Rúri, who printed photographs from her performance in 1974 when she totally racked a golden bench, and she and Niels, they exchanged these gifts. Like, she gave him this work and he gave her another work. And then Niels, he dismantled the bookwork and made it into the thing that you can see on the right, with all the covers like on display. And then he donated this work to the museum. So now we're in the process of installing an exhibition with this work, and we are discussing heavily with Rúri because he wants to address that her work was changed before it was donated to the collection. So this is maybe one example that we are sort of in discussion about now. Yeah. I think that's fine for now. Sorry, we went over time. So the questions are going to come later or when?
No.
Now? Okay, great. Bring it on.
I have a question. What would you say was your biggest challenge? Not only yours, but historically from the founding of the museum. What would you say was your biggest challenge?
My personal.
Your personal, but as well as what you perceive to be the biggest challenge upon the institution's founding.
Well, apart from the crisis management that happens regularly when the museum has to move or something, it has been sort of coming into terms with the limitation of the museum, even though it was established as a very open forum. The collection is gift-based. I'm sorry, but I didn't say that. We don't purchase work we've never been able to because of obvious reasons and money. And so now we're sort of making these decisions that we collect our own exhibition history. That is totally in line with what a museum should do. But Nýló was founded as the museum because the National Gallery was just doing such a poor job at the time. It's still very debatable what they're doing. But I would say what I find mostly challenging is how to address this gender gap. Because of this gift-based element, I want to tackle it as it's sort of a super power skill. Not Superman skill, but Superwoman skill, in a way. Because we are in this unique position of being able to talk to the artist directly. We have the exhibition history in front of us that's being circulated now. We can see that women were very visible as exhibiting artists, but their presence is not visible in the collection. So I don't think it's honest to go back in history and collect in the past and fill in the gaps that weren't properly been looked at 20 years ago. But to sort of create a more sort of clear collection policy and continue from there and properly learn from this. Because it felt like the museum it was very disappointing to realize this gap. 20% of the collection is by women, but 20% of the artworks are by women, but 1/3 of the artists that have donated work to the collection are women. So you can see the difference there. And this is something that we are addressing now, with so many other things as well. But as the inner aspect, yeah.
More questions?
Also about the gender question. So you said that you made an exhibition hall in the female public lavatory. So what is happening in the male lavatory?
That's a very good question. The lavatories are located at the bottom of the street called Reykjavík. And the two entrances are on each side of the street. So on the left side you have the female toilets, and they were never renovated. So they have this old porcelain.
What's going on in Reykjavík? You have a real gender.
I mean, you should see this. This is absolutely fantastic. They were never renovated. So they have the original porcelain decor, which is really nice. On the right side, the male lavatories is located. The lavatories, they were closed 7 years ago, so they have been an unused space for a really long time, since the crisis. But the male toilets are located right next to the Prime Minister's offices. And he made a statement to the city of Reykjavík, which owns the lavatories, no, we can't let you in or artists there due to safety reasons. So that's why. And they were renovated in the 80s, and they have this horrible plastic, vinyl, exactly, stuff. It's, no, not very interesting. and they remain empty. One more question?
Is there another question or no? So we say thanks a lot to you.